and the patient herself who was too focused on the marriage. However, the things only got worse and her vomiting became persistent and she became even more weak and fatigued and required help to attend nature calls too. And before the presentation, the patient almost moribund and couldn't function at all without help. She required help with eating, going to the bathroom and even getting up from the bed. The daughter recalls that she had a fluctuating course in her mind, meditation and reported a classical mild improvement in her sensorium often in the evenings. The attendants both noticed that she couldn't hold a proper conversation and even couldn't properly understand their words or questions. This morning things took a turn for the worse, and when she couldn't respond at all to their repeated concerned diagnosis, she was brought to the hospital in this state. The attendants can't recall any history of urinary incontinence or involuntary movements of her limbs. They deny a history of fever, headache or photophobia. They deny any focal weakness or any illicit substance use. The attendants deny any significant past medical history except for hypertension since 15 years, for which she has been taking tablet telmisartan 40 mg plus hydrochlorothiazide 4.5 mg for more than 10 years now. She adheres well to start restricted diet and take her meds on time. In personal history, her website was lost in bowels, constipation since 3 days, and normal menstruation and normal bladder movements. There is no significant family history of diabetes, hypertension, CA and asthma in the family. On general examination, patient is conscious, coherent and no pallor, icterus, cyanosis, clubbing, and lymphadenopathy and edema.
Okay, so what do the students? What do you think is the differentials for an elderly lady coming with altered sensorium without fever? So if you want to rule out meningitis, what will you see in this patient in the clinical findings? So have they mentioned in the clinical findings that there are no such clinical findings of meningitis? So what are those findings? Show us the findings. Yeah, in the general examination or even systemic examination, interestingly, there is no finding of CNS mentioned here at all. So this is a patient of CNS problem, and obviously the intern has copied from the notes of the PG. So no findings of CNS. So see, he has written CNS NAD. So the patient is an altered sensorium, and it will be difficult for you to find out what. Yeah, so CNS, higher mental function is important here. Then orientation to time, place, person. Then what else? For to rule out meningitis or to rule out subarachnoid hemorrhage. The patient could be having a subarachnoid hemorrhage. So what will happen? Which will be the same signs as meningitis. What are those signs called? Meningeal signs. So what are meningeal signs? What are the meningeal signs which are present? Wonder of wonders. We have got a UPS here. So this is the only place in the hospital where we have a UPS. Isn't it? And ventilator also?
Yes.
Oh, great. Fantastic. Huh. They're answering? Wow, very good. Yes, Brudzinski sign, Kernick sign. Yes. So the next question in the exam, where you would be face to face, we would ask you to demonstrate the Brudzinski and the Kernick sign in a patient. But here you won't be able to do that, and we will assume that you know that what is Kernick sign and what is Brudzinski sign. So it's not a big deal. So yes, so that all those things were negative, let us assume. When they say CNS NAD, they mean that it is not there. So no meningeal signs, just altered sensorium, but we don't know what kind of altered sensorium because that examination is missing here. So what next? So we look for what could be the possible reasons otherwise. So when your approach to a patient with altered sensorium or coma, you will essentially look for how to localize the whether there is any localizable lesion, which is also known as a structural lesion in the brain. So how do you rule out a structural lesion in the brain? The patient's body will show a focal neurological deficit. So focal neurological deficit will be manifested either as hemiparesis or monoparesis or with slurring of speech, as in the first patient we presented. That was a focal neurological deficit. Now this lady doesn't seem to be having any such focal neurological deficit. Now, if the patient was completely comatose, we would have opened her eyes and moved the head side to side to check for doll's eye movement. So there also, if there is a brainstem involvement, we could have figured out that there was a brainstem involvement. So that would also be taken as a focal neurological episode. Now here, probably the doll's eye was also absent because she was not completely comatose. So this is one lady with a CNS problem with not much of localization. Unlike the first patient who had very accurate localization of her problems clinically. So this patient doesn't have any localization. So whenever you have no localization but there is a brain involvement, you make the diagnosis of diffuse cerebral encephalopathy. And diffuse cerebral encephalopathy, what is the common cause of cerebral encephalopathy? Recently we had an epidemic in Andhra Pradesh. What is that place's name? Elluru? Elluru. So basically encephalitis. Encephalitis, and in Andhra we have from time to time a lot of Japanese bee encephalitis epidemics. So encephalitis is one possibility. But then the patient may have delirium, the patient would have fever. That's most important, fever. So this patient didn't have that. So the next possibility would be metabolic encephalopathy. So what are the commonest causes of metabolic encephalopathy? So one could be hypoxic encephalopathy, it could be hypercapnic encephalopathy, it could be hypoglycemic encephalopathy, probably the commonest cause. And it could be hyperammonemic encephalopathy, which is again very common because of cirrhosis of liver. We have shown you a few cirrhosis of liver here itself who had hyperammonia causing